What are the forces, challenges, and ideas that define the 21st century? Conversations to understand the greatest figures and stories of today to create a better tomorrow. This is the 21st Talks podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to 21st Talks podcast. Today we're doing something quite new. We're doing a Q&A. New for the channel, not new for podcasts in general. But nonetheless, we are going to be taking questions from different people who support us on Patreon. That is right, we have a Patreon. Check out the link down below if you want to help support this podcast and keep the team running. And also probably partially fund a very, very intense caffeine addiction that I have. So if you want to do any of the above, please go ahead and click that link down below. But one of the perks is submitting questions for Q&A that we will address each week. You can also send us some questions on Twitter and other places where social media is present for 21st Talks. And those ones are just going to be a little bit less likely that I'll see them. I get a lot more messages on those, and the Patreon questions will come first. Just as a major thank you, and also as a wonderful source of some good discussions. You guys ask a lot of good questions, and I really wanted to just have a forum in which I could address those each week, and I thought this was the best way to go. I started off laughing because the first time I went to record this, right as I did the intro, and finished it, the fire alarm just went off. So this is my second take. But nonetheless, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we can go ahead and jump into it with today's question. The first question for 21st Talks Q&As, which is, why existential risk? And that's a big question. That's a really, really big question. And typically when I'm asked it, there's a few different ways that people are going with it, right? Some people ask, how do you deal with existential risks? How do you deal with studying global catastrophes and, the fear that onsets is terrifying? All these kind of connected questions, but I think that takes it in a different direction than I really want to take it today. The reason why I picked this to be the first Q&A question is because the question of why you're doing something, that sort of core motivation is telling to a few psychological features of the activity, one of which is probably how deep you can dig into it and really just entrench your heels into the mud and really try to stand your ground when it comes to doing stuff that's challenging. And 21st Talks is something that is hard. It's hard to run this thing as a 21 year old. It's hard to start it when I was even younger, when I had even less direction. So ultimately, why X risk for me personally, I think is telling to both the meaning that I get from engaging with you guys, the audience, but also engaging with the field of existential risk more broadly. And it's also telling to, I think, some of the other things that people are kind of pulled into the field by. I think the fire alarm was a perfect example of my favorite aspect of studying existential risks. And that is, it kind of contextualizes all the little inconveniences in life. And it also contextualizes and sort of puts into context the really, really big stuff too. I can't articulate a number of times where I'm having a really lovely evening at home or a dull evening at home, and there is this same feeling that comes up from this moment of recognition of the time that we're living in. No matter what the situation that is happening is, when you study and are really involved in this field of existential risk and global catastrophic risk, it imbues your day-to-day with this sense of importance. And it's not a sense of importance that is based off some fallacious like ego of I'm going to stop all these terrible things from happening and hitting the world. I mean, it certainly can be sourced from that. Now, whether or not this is the most healthy is a different question, but the type of contextualization that I think I'm talking about here is incredibly psychologically rewarding, is that which comes from this knowledge and this occupation with a collective struggle. It helps it helps you to feel a little bit more human. And also it can be incredibly annoying, and it can be frustrating, and it has its own obstacles, right? Absolutely, and we'll talk about those in future weeks. But in short, it really, really helps to instill this feeling of deep gratitude for existing. And I love that. I love that absolutely. It's thrilling both intellectually, but also like deeply personally. And I think that's one of the reasons why I don't know which one actually came first, but I do know there's a correlation for me between a sense that the personal is the intellectual and where you're best fitted in terms of what you want to do with your day-to-day, right? What you want to do for your career, for a functioning work, and how that, connects to what ideas you're interested in, all these other things, right? And trying to reclaim that a little bit within the context of this hyper specialization that we're kind of necessitated to do if we, want to be successful people and all these other things in the modern economic system. That can be really, really alienating from our own sense of, connection to something bigger, right? When you spend all your time learning how to really effectively use Excel, or, it's whatever the specialty might be, accounting or physics or any of these things, right? I think physics is actually an exception to that in a very similar way that Existential is. But nonetheless, when you spend your days doing that sort of work, right, it's really important to have something that you can kind of look to, even if it's just an interest, even if Existential is only going to ever be a hobby of yours, in the same way that someone reads Shakespeare or enjoys watching Wes Anderson movies or something, right? Or getting really into Tolkien. Even if that's the extent to which you're going to be engaging with Existential, the fact that you're listening to this podcast alone indicates that some sense of you or some part of you has a sense of the importance of the time that we're living in. And Existential routinely reimagines that and routinely represents that to me individually across different life events. And that is absolutely tremendous to be able to fall back on and to lean on and to have as a part of my day-to-day life, right? It means when I stub my toe, effectively the way I conceptualize that toe being stubbed and the pain I get from it, it doesn't make it hurt any less, but it definitely makes my response to it a little bit more calibrated. Because, suddenly this sort of sense of, oh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to anyone, that kind of gets erased immediately, right? And obviously there are some days where I forget and I am farther away from this, this mission of working within the field of existential risk and communicating its ideas and findings and science and, its connection to, the human heart and, this emotional lives we're living in, all of that stuff that 21st Talks is and aims to do in the storytelling and conversations that we have. There are days where I'm farther away from that, but I recognize that the days where I'm closer to that are the days where I feel the most meaningful and I feel the most powerful as well. I feel the happiest. And it's not the type of happiness that euphoria is like, which is definitely an emotion that I'm quite familiar with. It's more consoling than that. It's elevating, but in a sort of a different way, right? And I think existential risk has that same sobering effect. So I don't know what is a sense of purpose and where the line between a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose and doing something that you think matters and know matters, and some independent quality of existential risk. Like I don't know if there's a line between those, right? Because it could just be that existential risk work is, if it's effective or, is engaging for you personally, is kind of inherently orienting and sort of beneficial because it has this sense of grand meaning to it, right? There's a collective thing that you're doing with it. That could be it. Or maybe there's some independent aspects of the field and literature that just deeply interests me personally and interests other people who are passionate about the field. And it's, just like, it's like any other like academic background, and, it's just like certain dispositions or sentiments or whatever that attracts certain people to it. But I know the thing for me that keeps me around, and doesn't just keep me around, but keeps propelling me forward and, has allowed me to overcome so many obstacles that I genuinely never thought I would. The reason why I think I was able to flip that script wasn't just, being in a different context or, being a bit older, having my prefrontal cortex developed a little bit more, having slightly better quality sleep or what have you. All those things certainly helped, but I think at its core, that sort of like deep motivation and ability to dig in deep and do stuff that's challenging, do stuff that I was afraid of, do stuff that fucking mattered, or at least that I hope one day will matter so much more than I can imagine right now. The thing that helped me get through that was a sense of purpose. So why existential risk? Because it gives an intrinsically meaningful quality to those day-to-day experiences, big and small, good and bad. And in that way, it helps you recognize the actual importance of living today. And also, in the same vein, in the same moment of realization, allows you to see above the clouds a little bit of those day-to-day frustrations and heights. It's a value system in addition to being an academic field. It's a value system in addition to being a way to have a meaningful ethical impact on the people alive today and future generations. And it gives existential context to a deeply, deeply indifferent universe. And I love that. And that propels me forward. So nonetheless, thank you guys so much for listening to this first episode. It's an interesting Q&A. It got incredibly existential there, in a different way than the word existential is being used in the word existential risk. We really need to create some proper vocabulary, like some shorthands for, when I use existential in terms of existential philosophy or psychology, and then existential in terms of, X risk. But nonetheless, thank you guys so much for listening. And I hope no one pulls a fire alarm in whatever building you're in, unless there's a fire, in which case I think that's probably a good thing. Not the fire, but pulling the fire alarm. All right, I'm going to go do my quiz for my psych class. But thank you guys so much once again for listening. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope you are able to engage in something that you truly feel is meaningful and gives you the same context that I know I feel when I engage with existential risk work. All right, thank you guys very much, and I will talk to you later.